and welcome to RCA Radio, a podcast where we cover the latest news and challenges in regulatory, compliance, and quality assurance facing the life science industries. I'm your host, Brandon Miller. In this episode of RCA Radio, we'll be looking at the medical device industry and the important things we can expect to happen in 2025. Today, I'm joined by Rod Mell, Executive Head of Life Science Consulting at RCA, as well as Jordan Elder, Director of Regulatory Affairs, also from RCA. Welcome, Rod and Jordan.
Hello, and thank you for inviting Rod and I to today's podcast.
Thank you both for joining me. With the new year upon us, I wanted to take some time to cover what changes we can expect in the device industry and how companies can prepare themselves for success with these incoming changes. So to start us off, I wanted to ask, what important things from 2024 are rolling over into 2025?
As I'm sure you've noticed, 2025 is shaping up to be a busy year for regulating authorities worldwide. One example of this is actually the European Union's medical device regulation, for EU MDR. Over the last several years, the EU MDR has faced major implementation delays and setbacks. The most recent delay was issued last July in 2024, and this was where Class 3 and 2B or high-risk devices were pushed back for MDR compliance through notified body certification to December 31st, 2027. While your medium and low-risk devices were required to comply no later than December 31st, 2028. Last October, the European Parliament adopted a resolution calling for revisions to the EU MDR, and this is due to the significant challenges with the current regulation. The resolution requires the Commission to propose, delegate, and implement updates to the MDR and the IVDR to address challenges and bottlenecks in the implementation of the MDR, while also ensuring the availability and safety of medical devices in the EU. Now, this request has been a long time coming, and it's great to see that the European Parliament recognizes that the regulations are overly complex in some areas. Several factors have led to this decision, and these include implementation challenges, risk of device shortages, as regulators had expressed significant concerns about potential device shortages due to delays in certification and the limited capacity of notified bodies to certify by the original MDR deadline, and the need for clarity and efficiency. This has been a major concern with most of industry and regulators. EU regulators are now seeking to improve clarity and efficiency in the regulatory process by reducing administrative burdens and streamlining these processes without compromising patient safety. So this resolution has also called for the creation of transparent and binding timelines for procedural steps in conformity assessment by notified bodies, required certainty and predictability for manufacturers in the pre-market phase. Time is a critical factor, and the lack of clarity around certification and market access timelines has been credited in creating unpredictability and inconsistency in decisions by notified bodies. The European Parliament is also advocating for the creation of clock stops as part of that process. The resolution also advocates for the elimination of recertification of products and the harmonization of these requirements across the EU. This is relevant in situations where an update or an adjustment to a medical device does not require a full recertification of the product. Additionally, the resolution emphasizes the need for fast-track and prioritization pathways for approval of innovative technologies in areas of unmet medical needs. The European People's Party, or the EPP, and MedTech Europe have recently pushed for the proposed changes to be implemented by Q3 of 2025. Though the MDR is unlikely to be updated and implemented so quickly, one thing is for certain: we can expect to see some significant changes to the framework in the near future.
Jordan, related to EU MDR is the topic of EUDAMED. This is another hot topic from the EU. I've talked with multiple industry experts that are dealing with this topic in particular and helping clients with requirements and timing for EUDAMED specifically. Can you provide some insights on the latest update and timing for EUDAMED specifically?
Certainly. With EUDAMED, currently only the actor, the UDI device, and the notified bodies and certificates modules are available after facing technical implementation delays. Last July, the EUDAMED regulation was amended to further align with updated implementation timelines and to help mitigate the potential risk of shortages of medical devices on the market. In order to facilitate this goal, the regulation is intended to, 1, extend the transitional periods for specific IVDs if certain conditions are met. 2, it requires manufacturers to inform the appropriate national competent authorities in case of their intention to interrupt or withdraw the supply of certain critical medical devices or IVDs. And 3rd, implement a gradual roll of the EUDAMED database. And this is through making mandatory use of the EUDAMED modules that are already available for voluntary use as soon as they're identified as functional. Now, the original plan for mandatory use of the complete EUDAMED system was in 2029. However, instead of waiting for all the modules to be fully functional, the EU plans to use a phased approach, which allows the individual modules to become mandatory once they are determined to be fully functional. The updated phased approach proposes the following in the timelines. So in Q1 of 2026, This is targeted for the mandatory use of the first functional modules, and this is likely going to be the UDI and device certificates and market surveillance. And then in Q3 of 2026, the vigilance module is expected to become mandatory. The development of the clinical investigation performance studies module is intended to continue through Q4 of 2026. And finally, in Q2 of 2027 is the target timeline for the full EUDAMED functionality requiring the use of all modules.
So this shift to a modular rollout, the revised timeline, are due to the complexities and challenges faced in developing and implementing such a comprehensive system. This approach allows for more gradual transition and gives manufacturers more time to adapt. However, I would strongly recommend, as I do believe you would as well, Jordan, that manufacturers familiarize themselves with the functionalities of each module and prepare for their mandatory use according to updated timelines. I also suggest that manufacturers consider using the currently available modules voluntarily to gain the experience and prepare for the mandatory transition. It is important to note that both EU MDR and EUDAMED timelines are still subject to change, so staying informed about the latest developments for medical device manufacturers operating in the EU market. We continue to see many manufacturers putting off both of these areas that could be a recipe for disaster once they are fully mandated and there's not enough time to get manufacturers quickly through the certification processes. They are quite long and usually end up requiring updates to the processes or procedures as part of the auditing process by third-party certification bodies. So please don't wait.
Yeah, we've been talking about the EU MDR implementation in EUDAMED for quite some time. So it is interesting to see that we will be continuing to talk about it in the coming years. And on that topic, how about the recent guidance documents that have been either published right at the end of the year or expected to roll out soon?
I'm happy to speak to this. Starting with recent updates, in December, the FDA released the updated final guidance document, the Global Unique Device Identification Database, GoodID. Guidance provides updates to several areas of the guidance and includes what I consider to be the most important update, which is the removal of the FDA preferred term or PT code in lieu of using the Global Medical Device Nomenclature, GMDN. This update requires that the device manufacturers use GMDN codes exclusively for identifying the devices in the GoodID database. FDA will no longer be using or recognizing PT codes moving forward. A more significant update is from a guidance document issued in December. The FDA finalized its guidance on marketing submission recommendations for a predetermined change control plan, and this is for artificial intelligence-enabled device software functions. This guidance replaces the draft guidance that was issued in April 2023 and signifies a critical step in the FDA's evolving approach to regulating AI-enabled medical devices. The guidance focuses on predetermined change control plans, or PCCPs, which allow manufacturers to modify AI-enabled devices after they've received their marketing authorization without requiring a new marketing submission for each change. This approach acknowledges the nature of AI development, requiring making multiple updates and changes as needed, and seeks to facilitate ongoing improvements to device performance. The FDA emphasized that a PCCP should comprehensively describe the following aspects. So they want to see planned modifications, and these modifications include specific and verifiable changes to the AI-enabled device software functions. The modifications should be clearly defined with measurable criteria for evaluating their impact on the device's performance. And they also want to see a modification protocol, and that's going to describe the methodology for developing, validating, and implement the modifications, including criteria for ensuring continued safety and effectiveness. Protocols should outline the steps involved in making changes, the data used for validation, and the procedures for assessing the impact of modifications on the device's intended use. Additionally, they also want to see an impact assessment. Manufacturers are expected to conduct an evaluation of the risks and benefits associated with the modifications, and also identify the manufacturer's risk mitigation strategies. This assessment should consider potential risks to patient safety, device effectiveness, and data integrity, as well as the measures taken to mitigate those risks. The final guidance I want to touch on incorporates several notable revisions compared to the 2023 draft guidance, including an expanded scope. The guidance now applies to all AI-enabled devices, not just those based on machine learning. The updated guidance also details the requirement for version control and maintenance of PCCPs, finally acknowledging that revisions may be required during the review process or after the device is marketed. The version control and maintenance section also provides recommendations for tracking changes to the PCCP, ultimately ensuring consistency between the approved PCCP and the device's current software version. The final guidance confirms that PCCPs may include modifications implemented automatically, such as through software updates. This allows for more efficient updates to AI-enabled devices, enabling manufacturers to improve device performance and address potential issues without requiring manual intervention or new marketing submissions. The guidance encourages manufacturers to establish real-world performance monitoring plans to track the impact of modifications on device performance and patient outcomes. This data can be used to identify potential issues, inform further modifications, and demonstrate the continued safety and effectiveness of the device. By incorporating real-world data and user feedback, manufacturers can refine AI algorithms and enhance the device's ability to diagnose, treat, and manage diseases. The guidance also provides recommendations for updated device labeling and public-facing documents to indicate the implemented modifications, which include details on the timing, the method of implementation, and user notification. This helps ensure that users are aware of the change to the device and can make informed decisions about its use. The FDA's final guidance on PCPs represents a significant step towards a more agile and adaptive regulatory framework. The shift towards a more proactive approach is critical for advancing innovation in AI-enabled medical devices and ensures that patients have appropriate access to safe and effective treatments. The last guidance document I want to mention today was issued in late November titled Transitional Enforcement Policy for Ethylene Oxide Sterilization Facility Changes for Class 3 Devices. This document is intended to address the critical issues of ethylene oxide sterilization facility changes for Class 3 devices. The FDA introduced this transitional enforcement policy to help manufacturers of Class 3 medical devices proactively secure alternative EO sterilization facilities without causing significant delays in the supply of critical medical devices. In the guidance, FDA indicates that they did not intend to object to the sterilization of Class 3 devices at a proposed new location and subsequent distribution prior to submitting a PMA site change supplement. However, in order to take advantage of the enforcement policy, manufacturers are expected to assess and document the site changes following the recommendations in the guidance. This guidance is a significant step towards addressing the changes posed by the challenges in EO sterilization operations. Policy provides a practical and flexible approach for manufacturers to ensure the continued availability of sterile medical devices while adhering to the regulations. Through proactively securing alternative sterilization facilities and conducting thorough validation, manufacturers can maintain the quality and safety of the devices and ensure reduced time to market using the new sterilization facility. Rod, are there any other guidance documents that you think are worth discussing?
Those are great guidance documents, Jordan. The only other guidance document I might add to the list you mentioned above would be computer software assurance for production and quality system software. We know that computer software systems and quality assurance is key to the agency, and probably something worth noting for manufacturers, making sure that they have their understanding around this guidance document. This document is intended to describe computer software assurance as a risk-based approach to establish confidence in the automation used for production or quality systems and identify where additional rigor may be appropriate. It's also to describe various methods and testing activities that may be applied to establish computer software assurance and provide objective evidence to fulfill regulatory requirements, such as computer software validation requirements in 21 CFR Part 820.
As we know, these guidance documents are pretty important to the FDA and regulating bodies. What else do we feel are the strategic priorities moving into 2025 for the agency?
Great question, Brandon. Based on recent FDA announcements and guidance documents, there are some potential shifts in priorities from the FDA that are worth discussing as we look forward in 2025. First, we can expect to see an increased focus on artificial intelligence, or AI. As AI becomes even more integrated into our lives, it's no surprise to see that manufacturers are leveraging this technology in novel ways to improve patient safety and device effectiveness. The FDA appears to be prioritizing the regulation of AI-enabled medical devices as we expect new and updated guidance documents addressing lifecycle management, pre-market submission recommendations, and the use of real-world evidence for AI devices to be at the forefront of FDA's priorities. Cybersecurity is another ongoing hot topic with the FDA, has been for some years. It's highly likely that the FDA will emphasize cybersecurity for medical devices, issuing potential guidance and regulations aimed at strengthening device security and protecting patient safety in the connected healthcare environment. Real-world evidence is another area of interest, as the data generated over the last several years has yielded positive results for industry, as real-world evidence continues to provide critical data to manufacturers we expect to see FDA focus on how the evidence can be better utilized to support regulatory decision-making for medical devices, potentially expanding the role of real-world evidence in demonstrating device safety and effectiveness. With the recent challenges posed by the rise in novel technologies and the use of AI, FDA is likely to look at streamlining and modernizing the regulatory process, which would include updating the 510K third-party review program and emergency use authorization EUA review and processes. And finally, given the recent challenges with device shortages during COVID and even continuing in the years after COVID, including present times, the FDA will likely be looking to prioritize initiatives enhancing supply chain resilience for medical devices. We saw more involvement from the agency in this area during COVID, and we expect this could potentially include legislative proposals and guidance to strengthen supply chains and prevent future shortages.
I would like to add, in addition to these specific areas, the FDA's overarching strategic priorities for 2025, which were originally part of a detailed plan issued in 2022, also include promoting a modern and diverse workforce. This priority suggests we will continue to see a focus on internal agency changes to improve efficiency and responsiveness. Another of FDA's priorities include enhancing organizational agility and resilience. This will likely mean FDA will continue to place focus on adopting more flexible and adaptive regulatory approaches, such as the increased use of enforcement discretion policies. The last priority identified by the agency is the advocacy of health equity. This FDA priority may influence the FDA's approach to evaluating medical devices, ensuring they are safe and effective for all populations. However, I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the potential for even more change as the new administration is expected to complete the transition soon. As with any new administration, it's no surprise that many people are wondering what we can expect. While we do not know specifics regarding agendas or priorities, we do know that the new administration plans to focus on patient safety and removing inefficient and burdensome barriers to market.
Great point, Jordan. We could also take a page from the 2017 administration playbook. I would not be surprised to see a reduction in the number of regulations issued by the FDA and other regulatory agencies. In 2017, if you remember, the administration issued an executive order requiring that for every new regulation implemented, 2 must be rescinded. This order also aligns with your point about the current administration stance on removing inefficient and burdensome barriers to the market. Based on recent interviews, the incoming administration plans to require a more proactive stance on public health rather than a more reactive approach. We can also expect to see a continued focus on supply chain and shortage issues as the new administration seeks to strengthen and increase manufacturing in the U.S., therefore reducing dependence on foreign manufacturers during device shortages.
Thanks, Rod. Those are great points. Finally, the new administration has indicated the intent to reduce inefficiency and reprioritize HHS staff to ensure that resources are appropriately utilized across the agency. While we do not have any information pertaining to specifics, when reading between the lines, it seems apparent that the new administration intends to trim excess or inefficient aspects of the agency and reprioritize resources where able to ensure the agency is efficient and lean. But we don't know what this would entail. Potentially reducing the resources dedicated to FDA's device evaluation or inspections could lead to longer device review timelines and longer periods between facility inspections. With that said, it is important to note that this is a speculation, albeit speculation backed with information presented from the incoming administration.
Those are very interesting points that you make, considering the uncertainty of the new administration rolling out soon. As it always is important, what about the QMR versus the QMSR?
Certainly, I'm happy to speak to that. The agency recently issued the Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR Final Rule, updating the quality system regulations, which was originally known as the QSR. This change was intended to harmonize medical device quality system requirements with that of the ISO 13485 standard. Where the original QSR focused on ensuring product safety and effectiveness with rigorous FDA oversight, the QMSR is intended to reduce regulatory redundancies and simplify processes by aligning more closely with international standards. It's promoting a more unified approach to global market access. This rule comes into effect on February 2nd, 2026, just a little over a year. It's prudent that manufacturers do not delay in implementing the updated QMSR requirements into their quality system. FDA intends to begin enforcing the QMSR updates at that time and expects manufacturers to fully comply with these requirements. Depending on the stated deficiency to the QMSR, manufacturers who have not updated to comply may find themselves subject to 483s and warning letters during their next inspection.
Great points, Jordan. Recently, I think we've had several clients ask whether they can leverage their existing ISO 13485 certification in lieu of FDA QMSR audits. Unfortunately, to the best of our knowledge, the FDA does not plan to accept ISO 13485 certifications as a substitute for audits. However, I would recommend to those who are interested to consider certifying to MedSAP, which covers quality system requirements for the US, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and Japan. I have personally had instances in my past where the FDA had informed one of my sites about an upcoming QSIT inspection. When I followed up with them, letting them know that we had our MedSAP certification and had just gone through a recent audit, they ended up canceling the QSIT inspection. Now, we can't expect that to occur every time, but it has happened on multiple occasions in my recent past.
What do you think about the agency inspections moving forward this year?
I'm happy to discuss recent and expected trends within FDA regarding inspections and device evaluation. While FDA inspection trends tend to align year after year, on occasion, FDA does place a greater focus on areas where they feel manufacturers may be deficient. In 2024, there seemed to be a resurgence in findings pertaining to quality audits for inadequate procedures and also customer complaints. These two areas have typically been in the top 10 FDA findings since 2009, but seem to fall off the top 10 inspection deficiency list sometime in the early 2020s. I would highly recommend manufacturers who have not had a recent inspection, and even those who have, take a look at these two areas and ensure compliance before FDA stops by for an inspection. As expected, the remainder of FDA's inspection trends, which seem to align year after year, included areas such as lack of or inadequate procedures, lack of or inadequate complaint procedures, non-conforming product, lack of or inadequate procedures, purchasing controls, lack of or inadequate procedures, lack of or inadequate process validation, documentation, lack of written MDR procedures, or training, lack of or inadequate procedures. There seems to be a trend of lack of inadequate procedures going on.
Jordan, I agree with your comments. In the last several years/decades, the medical device 483 items have been remarkably similar. They have continued to find issues in these same areas for a very long time. This means a couple of things. One could be that companies are just not keeping the changes current in their processes or from facility to facility. Or the second could just be that companies are not keeping an eye on what is being identified across their industry. These are areas where we continue to help clients improve their processes and procedures. I suspect these areas will continue to be the focus for the agency over the next several years.
One last thing I wanted to highlight is a positive trend coming out of 2024, and that's the overall decrease in device evaluation time. In 2024, FDA received about 3,600 applications, and that's close to the same number they received in 2023. However, FDA reduced their total time for evaluation from 138 days in 2023 to 104 days in 2024. That data does take into account time for AA requests as part of that timeline. Overall, though, since 2021, FDA has consistently reduced their total time to decision. I think I can speak for everyone when I say this is a trend that I hope we continue seeing over the next several years.
And as we wrap things up, what can companies do to prepare themselves for these expected changes that are coming?
I think the most important takeaway I can give to companies is don't delay, whether this is through EU MDR, the EUDAMED update, complying with the QMSR. Don't wait. Time is going to be here before you know it, and you're going to end up in a deficient state. So get started today.
I agree with that, Jordan. I think along with that, if companies are struggling in just finding the time to be able to do those or make the process improvements, do the research, working with a third party like RCA to perform gap assessments for MedSAP, EU MDR, 13485, any of those is highly recommended. I would say also understanding your own internal processes, watching those agency trends. They have not changed in medical device over the years. And, for companies to really look at that and really focus on those areas, that would give them a huge step forward and maybe avoid some 483 woes.
I appreciate all those insights, and I know that our listeners will. And I want to thank you both for taking the time to go over what we can expect in the medical device industry in 2025 and how companies can prepare themselves for these incoming changes. And I also want to be sure to thank our listeners for tuning into this episode of RCA Radio. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know when we upload the next episode of RCA Radio. Thanks again and have a great day.